Hey everybody, it's your girl Nail and welcome to Simply Nail's Tiny Studio. Here in the Tiny Studio, we talk about all things crochet, all things dreadlocks, and all things vintage Coach, because you know I love a good vintage Coach handbag. Yes, I do. Today, though, we are going to be reading excerpts from Prince Harry's book or his memoir called Spare. And I have a copy right here. And I want to thank the publicist over at Random House for sending me a review copy of Spare. And I am going to share my thoughts about this memoir with you here in the tiny studio. And I'm going to read excerpts of Spare to you as well. Did I already say that? Who knows? I am drinking some delicious blueberry tea here in the tiny studio. I'm usually drinking tea anyway, but I am really drinking tea because we are reading Spare. So let's just get started, okay? Spare is broken down into parts. So we're going to start off with part 1 of Spare. And it begins with a quote. And that quote is by William Faulkner. The past is never dead. It's not even past. So, are you ready? Are you ready to get into Spare? Let's get into it. Now, as I read, I'm going to, briefly hop in here and give some thoughts or commentary from my own perspective. I hope that's okay with you. Let's begin. We agreed to meet a few hours after the funeral in the Frogmore Gardens by the old Gothic ruin. I got there first. I looked around, saw no one. I checked my phone. No texts, no voicemails. They must be running late, I thought, leaning against the stone wall. I put away my phone and told myself, stay calm. The weather was quintessentially April. Not quite winter, not yet spring. The trees were bare, but the air was soft. The sky was gray, but the tulips were popping. The light was pale, but the indigo lake, threading through the gardens, glowed. How beautiful it all is, I thought, and also how sad. Once upon a time, this was going to be my forever home. Instead, it had proved to be just another brief stop. When my wife and I fled this place, in fear for our sanity and physical safety, I wasn't sure when I'd ever come back. That was January 2020. Now, 15 months later, here I was, days after waking to 32 missed calls, and then one short, heart-racing talk with Granny. Harry, Grandpa's gone. The wind picked up, turned colder. I hunched my shoulders, rubbed my arms, regretted the thinness of my white shirt. I wished I had not changed out of my funeral suit. I wished I thought to bring a coat. I turned my back to the wind and saw, looming behind me, the Gothic ruin, which in reality was no more Gothic than a millennium wheel. Some clever architect, some bit of stagecraft, like so much around here, I thought. I moved from the stone wall to a small wooden bench. Sitting, I checked my phone again, peered up and down the garden path. Where are they? Another gust of wind. Funny, it reminded me of Grandpa, his wintry demeanor maybe, or his icy sense of humor. I recall one particular shooting weekend years ago. A mate, trying to make conversation, asked Grandpa what he thought of my new beard, which had been causing concern in the family and controversy in the press. Should the Queen force Prince Harry to shave? Grandpa looked at my mate, looked at my chin, broke into a devilish grin. That's no beard. Everyone laughed. To beard or not to beard? That was the question. But leave it to Grandpa to demand more beard. Let's grow the luxurious bristles of a bloody Viking. I thought of Grandpa's strong opinions, his many passions, carriage driving, barbecuing, shooting, food, beer, the way he embraced life. He had that in common with my mother. Maybe that was why he'd been such a fan. Long before she was Princess Diana, back when she was simply Diana Spencer, kindergarten teacher, secret girlfriend of Prince Charles, my grandfather was her loudest advocate. Some say he actually brokered my parents' marriage. If so, an argument could be made that Grandpa was the prime cause in my world. But for him, I wouldn't be here. Neither would my older brother. Then again, maybe our mother would be here if she hadn't married Pa. What you guys think so far? Very interesting. I think we all do it when we lose someone that we love. We, especially tragically. We think about the what ifs. That's normal thinking. Especially when you're dealing with grief. I recall one recent chat, just me and Grandpa, not long after he turned 97. He was thinking about the end. He was no longer capable of pursuing his passions, he said, and yet the thing he missed most was work. Without work, he said, everything crumbles. He didn't seem sad, just ready. You have to know when it's time to go, Harry. I glanced now into the distance, towards the many skyline of crypts and monuments alongside Frogmore, the royal burial ground, final resting place for so many of us, including Queen Victoria. Also, the notorious Wallis Simpson. Also, her doubly notorious husband, Edward, the former king and my great-great-uncle. After Edward gave up his throne for Wallis, after they fled Britain, both of them fretted about their ultimate return, both obsessed about being buried here. The Queen, my grandmother, granted their plea, but she placed them at a distance from everyone else, beneath a stooped plane tree. One last finger wag, perhaps. One final exile, maybe. I wonder how Wallis and Edward felt now about all their fretting. Did any of it matter in the end? I wonder if they wondered at all. Were they floating in some airy realm, still mulling their choices, or were they nowhere, thinking nothing? Could there really be nothing after this? Does consciousness, like time, have a stop? Or maybe, I thought, just maybe they're here right now, next to the fake Gothic ruin, or next to me, eavesdropping on my thoughts. And if so, maybe my mother is too. The thought of her, as always, gave me a jolt of hope and a burst of energy and a stab of sorrow. So if you're not familiar with the former King Edward and his wife Wallis Simpson. If you're not familiar with the story, let me just give you a brief synopsis. Edward fell in love with Wallis Simpson, an American socialite who happened to be divorced. They were in love and had a really, had a great love affair. And then Edward's father died, and he ascended to the throne, or the crown ascended upon him. Now, for some reason, and I just don't understand why, but for some reason, the Church of England has a thing with their monarchy marrying people who are divorced. And, for the Church of England to have been founded by King Henry VIII and founded because he wanted to divorce his wife and marry someone else, it's really ironic that King Edward, through the the Church of England would have had a problem with him marrying someone who was divorced. It doesn't make sense, but you know how I feel about religiosity anyway. So anyhow, it was just frowned upon him actually marrying Wallis Simpson. So he loved her, he married her, and when he married her, when he made the decision to marry her, he abdicated his throne, or he abdicated the crown to Queen Elizabeth's father, and Queen Elizabeth's father became the king. And because of Edward abdicating his crown, then he was basically exiled from the family. And the reason he is buried so far away, he's buried on the grounds, the family burial grounds, the royal family burial grounds. He's there, but he's still in death way, way over there. Could be due to the fact that Queen Elizabeth's mother really, really disliked Edward for, abdicating his crown, because Queen Elizabeth's father was the spare. So he wasn't groomed to be a monarch or groomed to be the king. Edward was. And throwing Elizabeth's dad into that role was a lot. It was a lot for Queen Elizabeth's father, and it was a lot for the Queen Mother. And there were a lot of different things going on with Queen Elizabeth's father, as far as he wasn't prepared for the role. A lot of kings, and kind of like Prince William is right now, you're groomed to step into the role of being king or being queen, and the spare is just tossed to the side. The spare gets to do whatever they want. They get to live their own life out of the spotlight of the people. Well, I should say the spotlight is not completely on them all the time. So I'm guessing in death, Queen Elizabeth, continued that animosity that her mom had for King Edward. And I guess all of them, and that would be Princess Margaret as well, the animosity they had for King Edward of just, throwing away the crown or passing the crown on to and what was her father's name? Was he King was it King George? I think that was Elizabeth's father's name. I'm not sure. Or maybe King George was the grandfather. I don't know. I'm not a royal historian. Let's just get back to the book. But that was some tea for you, just in case you didn't know who King Edward or the former King Edward was and why he is buried and his wife is buried way over there away from the family. I guess it was like Queen Elizabeth was like, well, look, okay, you're here on the royal burial grounds. Okay, that's all. That's all I'm going to give you. You got that. Okay, so let's get back to the book. I miss my mother every day. But that day on the verge of that nerve-wracking rendezvous at Frogmore, I found myself longing for her, and I couldn't say just why. Like so much about her, it was hard to put into words. Although my mother was a princess, named after a goddess, both those terms always felt weak, inadequate. People routinely compared her to icons and saints, from Nelson Mandela to Mother Teresa to Joan of Arc. But every such comparison, while lofty and loving, also felt wide of the mark. The most recognizable woman on the planet, one of the most beloved, my mother was simply indescribable. That was the plain truth. And yet, how could someone so far beyond everyday language remain so real, so so, so palpably present, so exquisitely vivid in my mind? How was it possible that I could see her, clear as the swan skimming towards me on that indigo lake? How could I hear her laughter, loud as the songbirds in the bare trees? Still, there is so much I didn't remember, because I was so young when she died. But the greater miracle was all that I did. Her devastating smile, her vulnerable eyes, her childlike love of movies and music and sweets and us. Oh, how she loved my brother and me. Obsessively, she once confessed to an interviewer. Well, Mummy, vice versa. Maybe she was omnipresent for the very same reason that she was indescribable, because she was light, pure, and radiant light. And how can you really describe light? Even Einstein struggled with that one. Recently, astronomers rearranged their biggest telescopes, aimed them at one tiny crevice in the cosmos, and managed to catch a glimpse of one breathtaking sphere, which they named Earendel, the Old English word for morning star. Billions of miles off, and probably long vanished, Earendel is closer to the Big Bang, the moment of creation, than our own Milky Way. And yet it's somehow still visible to mortal eyes because it's just so awesomely bright and dazzling. That was my mother. Mm. The way he described his mom, Princess Diana, is just awesome. I have to say, he's very awesome. What a tribute to her. What a tribute to any mom. And you wonder sometimes, I wonder sometimes as a mother, how my children see me. And when it's time to eulogize me, what will they say? Will they compare me to the brightest star in the sky? Probably not. But I know that they do love me and I know that they adore me. So I don't know how descriptive they would be at eulogizing me. But this was a great tribute to his mom. I enjoyed reading that. Okay, back to the book. That was my mother. That was why I could see her, sense her always, but especially that April afternoon at Frogmore. That and the fact that I was carrying her flag. I come to those gardens because I wanted peace. I wanted it more than anything. I wanted it for my family's sake and for my own, but also for hers. People forget how much my mother strove for peace. She circled the globe and many times over, trapezed through minefields, cuddled AIDS patients, consoled war orphans, always working to bring peace to someone somewhere, and I knew how desperately she would want, no, did want, peace between her boys and between us two and Pa, and among the whole family. For months, the Windsors had been at war. There had been strife in our ranks, off and on, going back centuries, but this was different. This was a full-scale public rupture, and it threatened to become irreparable. So though I had flown home specifically and solely for Grandpa's funeral, while there I'd asked for this secret meeting with my older brother Willie and my father to talk about the state of things, to find a way out. But now I looked once more at my phone, once more up and down the garden path, and I thought, maybe they've changed their minds. Maybe they're not going to come. Wow. So what you think? You think they're going to show up? Willie, who is Prince William, and Pa, who is at the time was Prince Charles, now King Charles III. What do you think is going to happen next? Well, you have to tune in to another episode of Simply Nails Tiny Studio, Nails Book Club to find out, won't you? Next time, we'll get into it and we'll find out whether or not they show up at Frogmore, the royal burial ground. We'll find out if they actually showed up for that secret meeting. Okay? Thank you for hanging out with me in the tiny studio today. I really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this reading or if you enjoyed the book club today, give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed to Simply Nails Tiny Studio, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and subscribe. Thank you so much for hanging out with me in the tiny studio. I'll see you next time in the book club. In the tiny studio. I'll see you soon.